There's a spiritual principle most people will never hear about. It operates in silence. It doesn't wait for your permission. And it activates the moment you make your first financial decision of the year. Ancient texts called it the law of first fruits. Modern psychology calls it priming. But in the spirit realm, it's known as the seal. What you do with your first money in 2026 doesn't just affect that transaction. It creates a vibrational blueprint, a frequency, a spiritual agreement that echoes through every dollar you touch for the next 365 days. Most people unknowingly curse their finances in January and spend the rest of the year wondering why nothing changes. This isn't about superstition. This is about understanding the invisible architecture of abundance. And it begins with a single choice. Let me tell you about a man I once knew. January 1st, 2019. He woke up with hope. New year, new mindset. Within hours, he spent his first paycheck of the year on something he didn't need, a fleeting comfort. By December, he was in the same financial prison he'd sworn to escape. He never connected the dots, but the spiritual realm did. Here's what most people don't realize. Your first financial act of the year isn't just an act. It's a declaration, a statement to the universe, to your subconscious, and to the unseen forces that govern provision. You're not just spending money, you're setting a tone, a frequency, a spiritual precedent that will govern every financial decision you make for the next 12 months. Think of it like this. Imagine your year is a river, and your first spending decision is the stone you drop at the source. That ripple doesn't stay where it started. It travels, it multiplies, it touches everything downstream. If that first ripple carries fear, lack, or impulsivity, those frequencies compound. But if it carries intention, gratitude, or investment, those frequencies multiply too. The ancient Hebrews understood this. They called it first fruits. The first portion of every harvest wasn't theirs to keep. It was an offering, a seed, a spiritual act that unlocked the rest. Not because God needed their grain, but because they needed the posture, the discipline, the declaration that they trusted the source more than the supply. Now, you don't have to follow any religious tradition, but you do need to understand the principle. Your first financial move in 2026 is a spiritual vote. It tells your mind, your spirit, and the quantum field around you what kind of year you're expecting. Spend it on escape, and you program scarcity. Spend it on investment, in yourself, in others, in growth. And you program expansion. Here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. This principle doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about your actions. You can say you want abundance all year long. But if your first act is rooted in fear, lack, or distraction, that's the seed you've planted. And seeds always produce after their kind. So what do? Pause. Before you spend your first dollar, ask yourself, does this act represent the energy I want to carry all year? Does it reflect provision or panic, investment or impulse, gratitude or grasping? This isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about breaking the autopilot that keeps most people financially asleep. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know: the enemy of your finances isn't lack of money, it's lack of intention. And intention begins with a single, deliberate, spiritually aligned choice. Your first spend is your first seed. Make it count. Think of your financial year as a photograph being developed in a dark room. The first chemical you pour determines how the entire image will appear. Your first spending decision works the same way. It's not just a transaction, it's a template. In the invisible realm, where thoughts become things and patterns become destiny, this initial choice sends out a signal. It tells your subconscious mind what to expect. It informs the quantum field around you about your relationship with money. If that first decision is rushed, fearful, or unconscious, you've just programmed those qualities into your financial operating system. Your brain will then seek confirmation of that pattern throughout the year, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if your first financial act is intentional, generous, or investment focused, you establish an entirely different frequency. You're essentially calibrating your internal GPS toward abundance rather than lack. This isn't mysticism. It's how the reticular activating system in your brain works. What you focus on expands, and your first financial focus becomes the lens through which you see and experience every financial opportunity for the next 12 months, for thousands of years. Cultures across the world practiced a principle that modern society has forgotten: honoring the first. The Hebrews brought the first grain of their harvest to the temple. Ancient farmers planted the first seeds with ceremony. Indigenous tribes treated the first hunt of the season as sacred. Why? Because they understood something profound about spiritual mathematics. The first isn't just chronologically first, it's positionally powerful. It carries authority over everything that comes after it. When you treat your first portion as special, as significant, as worth your highest intention, you're activating a spiritual law that transcends religion or culture. You're declaring that you don't operate from desperation or scarcity. You're announcing that you trust the source of your provision enough to be deliberate with your first portion. This creates what psychologists call commitment and consistency. Once you start your year with financial wisdom, your mind wants to remain consistent with that identity. The ancient farmers knew honor the first, and the rest will follow. Dishonor it, and you break the energetic chain that connects seed to harvest, intention to manifestation, decision to destiny. Every financial decision carries an emotional signature. When you spend from fear, hoarding, panic, buying, grabbing at comfort because you're afraid it won't come again, you're operating from a scarcity consciousness. Your nervous system registers this. Your subconscious files it away. And most dangerously, the universe responds to the frequency you're broadcasting, which is there's not enough. Fear based spending creates a psychological loop. You feel lack. You spend to fill the void. The spending confirms the lack, and the cycle repeats. Impulsive spending works similarly. It's unconscious, reactive, disconnected from your higher self. But when you spend with intention, you pause. You ask ye, does this align with my values? Does this serve my growth? You're no longer a slave to impulse. You're a steward of resources. And when you add gratitude, genuine appreciation for the money in your hand and where it's going, you shift into an abundance frequency. Gratitude tells your brain, I have enough to give, to choose, to invest. That signal changes everything. It opens your perception to opportunities you would have missed in scarcity mode. Intention and gratitude don't just change what you buy, they change who you become in the process of buying. Most people think they need more money to solve their financial problems. They're looking at the wrong variable. The real issue isn't the amount in your account, it's the level of consciousness you bring to your financial decisions. You can have $1 million and still operate from scarcity if you're not aware. You can have very little and still activate abundance if you're intentional. The moment your financial year begins, that first transaction, that first choice, is a test of awareness. Are you awake? Are you present? Or are you sleepwalking through your finances the way you sleepwalked through last year? Most financial failure happens in unconscious moments. The impulse buy, the emotional purchase, the fear-driven decision made at 11 p.m. when you're tired and vulnerable. But abundance requires vigilance, especially at the beginning, because if you miss that first moment, if you let it pass in unconsciousness, you've set a pattern of unconsciousness for the entire year. The good news, awareness is free. It costs nothing to pause, to breathe, to ask yourself, is this the energy I want to carry forward? That pause, that moment of awareness, is worth more than any amount of money. It's the difference between repeating last year and creating something entirely new.